online we've got Gary Maloney from NZTA. We've got Councillors Crosby, McMillan as well online, and we have today. Well, I'll do the announcement about the live streaming first, actually. But welcome to everybody. I remind members and staff that the public section of this meeting has been live streamed and recorded, and that the recordings will be made available on the Bay Plenty Regional Council website following the meeting. I also remind all present that local government decision making affords no protection to councillors, council officers, and the public for comments made during meetings that are subsequently challenged in the court of law and determined to be slanderous. So, thank you. We have apologies today from, with late arrival for Sue Collins of the NZTA, or she might come on Zoom, I think. Councillor O'Brien from Rotorua is an apology, as is Mayor Tapsell. Unfortunately, we don't have any representation there today because they've got a very important meeting over there. We also have apologies from Councillor Thompson from the Regional Council and Councillor Taylor from Tauranga City. Councillor Kurak will sit in as the alternate. Okay, are there any further apologies? Someone move that they be accepted.
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor Nees as well.
Chair, can we just, is Ken Shirley on there?
Ken Shirley is, we've heard nothing yet.
Yeah, no, he was an apology.
Oh, here's an apology?
Yes.
Okay, we add Ken Shirley as an apology. Well, we've got enough councillors, regional councillors for our quorum, so it's good. Yep, so it's been moved and seconded. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
We move on. Items not on the agenda, there are none. Order of business, there is no change. Are there any declarations of conflicts of interest? Being none, we move on. Public excluded business to be transferred into the open. I don't think there is any, is it? There is none. We go to page 8 on the agenda, which is the minutes of the previous meeting of the 19th of November. First of all, if someone who has read them should declare them as true and correct.
So moved, Chairman.
So moved. Do I have a second? Second of Mayor Denyer. So Thurston Denyer. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Matters arising. Are there any matters that anyone wants to comment on? No, there is none. We'll move on that case. We move to presentations. The Arataki report, I think, is the first one up. James Hall, I think you're presenting that one.
Good koutou katoa. Today I'll be taking you through Q2 Arataki report, which is the performance monitoring from the 1st of October until the 31st of December 2024. Trust everyone has had an opportunity to review the report, so today I'll mainly touch on some of the more interesting data points that the insights we've taken from the period. If you have any questions, we'll endeavour to answer them in the meeting. However, if we can't, we'll go away. We'll make sure you get an answer. Q2 we had 777,000 boardings, which is down about nearly 4% on the previous year for bus services. This is our first downward trend. However, on the year, we're at almost 51% of the yearly target. Year-to-date patronage at the end of Q2 is nearly 51%, with the patronage being slightly down across most routes. We feel it's maybe seasonally affected with the Christmas holiday season. Fare box recovery ratio. This will also be potentially the last time we report on this. We'll be moving to private share once private share has been agreed between the council and NZTA.
Jamie, are you happy to take questions as we go through?
Sure.
If anybody has questions, just raise their hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just on that, with the private share, is that on the way we calculate it? Is that the agreement that you're referring to?
No, the targets that will be set.
Oh, okay,
Yes.
right. So, is there a standardised methodology across the country on how to calculate that private share? Does it include advertising on buses, for example?
Yes, it does.
So we will be able to benchmark the way we measure it with other councils.
We'll see the proportion of child patronage has remained consistent year to date, 23-24 and 24-25. However, paying adults has decreased. An increase in accessibility concession customers have also had a minor impact.
Pardon?
Yeah, I was just going to check, like, do we have any sort of, understanding of why that's trending for the adult fares, which I look at the fare recovery, and I mean, it's gone down. Tauranga and Rotorua are both affected. So is there anything we can see in that pattern?
This is the first quarter that we've seen a decrease. So one quarter doesn't make a trend yet. It's a data point. That's interesting. So we'll be monitoring it. Seasonally, December is a lower year, with Christmas and Boxing Day landing on Wednesday, Thursday may influence people taking earlier leave period, which may negatively impact PT for commuters. However, until we see Q3, we'll be watching very closely.
Through you, Chair, if you just wouldn't mind going back a slide, Jamie. Probably the other thing just to bring to your attention, the graph on the right there shows the percentage splits of our passenger types. So what we've seen there is a small change in the composition, and we only collect a full fare from the green block, the full fare paying adults. So if we see a small change in that consists of the passengers, that has a fairly significant swing on our fare box recovery.
Moving into Tauranga network, Tauranga is down about 7% on Q2 of the previous year. Year to date, the urban passengers is up nearly 1% on the previous year to date. However, that's due mainly to strong Q1 growth. Q2 saw an average of 203 trips dropped or delayed per month. It's almost 1% or 0.8% of the total scheduled trips. Although this is a 7% increase on the previous quarter, it is a reduction of nearly 70% on the same quarter in the prior year, which saw Cameron Road Phase 1 being completed. This shows the relationship between the transport system and missed trips, which we'll touch on again with Rotorua. Q2 for December for Tauranga schools. It's a very short time period. Schools year to date, passengers are nearly up 12% on the previous year to date, mainly due to strong Q1 growth. Foreshadowing. Sure. Rotorua total boardings down nearly 9% on Q2 of the previous year. Year to date, passengers are down nearly 2.7% on the previous year to date. Rotorua's Q2 saw an average of 82 trips dropped or delayed per month, nearly 0.6% of the total scheduled trips. The increase in missed trips through Q2 was part due to a serious incident where a tanker leaked thousands of litres of bitumen in Mangataha in early November, which saw the closure of State Highway 5 for a sustained period of time. Also, in mid-November, we saw a large number of missed trips as a result of the planned Hikoi Moti Tiriti on 15th of November, where approximately 10,000 people participated, which temporarily blocked Fenton Street.
So, Jamie, just looking at Tauranga versus Rotorua, you know, not comparable directly at all, but if we go back to Tauranga, it does appear to be a lot of trips, you know, and you've highlighted the first three highest, you know, 120 trips on one route missed. Is that that's just over the quarter, isn't it?
Or total through each year. Two hundred and three trips drop delay per month.
Yeah. Do we have really good visibility on that? Because that's a key component of why people won't take a bus. Even if it's perception, they want to know that they can have reliability so they can get to, you know, and that's the feedback I get from people, is I would take the bus, but I just cannot rely, and you know, I don't have enough confidence that I won't end up missing my appointment or whatever. Do we have visibility on that? Because it is.
Yeah, through you, Chair. So the numbers in the blue call-outs are over the quarter. If you look at the top three routes in terms of cancellations, Route 5 is due to the unpredictable traffic in Mount Maunganui. Route 2, same, Mount and into Arataki, where there's a lot of congestion. And Route 55, that's the southern end of Cameron Road through Greerton, especially in the afternoons. The one that does usually make the top three, but I'm guessing is in fourth, is Route 40, due to the delays coming out of Welcome Bay across Turret Road Bridge in the morning. Yeah, I completely understand the public's frustrations around reliability, but the challenge is the level of traffic and the unpredictability of traffic in those key choke points.
Thank you. Councillor Lees?
Could I just ask how that works in practice? Because at what point is the decision made that route is not going to run? Is it by the contractor who's looking at the real-time data and realising that there's already 3 buses, say for example, which I see quite often, in a line, and there's no point in dispatching another one? So does that bus that doesn't run, does it just go and find a corner to hide behind?
Through you, Chair. Pretty much. So at the point where the knock-on impact of that delay gets too extreme, so the bus is then going to be late for subsequent trips, usually that's when it gets over 20 minutes late. The operator will radio through and tell the driver to not run that trip and then go to a later trip on their duty card to try and then get the future trips back on time. And then we are notified at the end of service in a daily report that the operator provides to us.
Councillor Thurston?
Oliver, is this the new format of presenting? I've been introduced yet.
Through you, Chair. So yes.
It's excellent. I was going to say it's brilliant.
Yes, so members will recall that to previous meetings we've had a much chunkier version of this report. So what we discussed with the chair and the deputy was doing a slightly more streamlined Arataki report and then doing the more fulsome report perhaps annually, just recognising the amount of staff time that goes into producing this.
Just another question, is driver unavailability a much bigger issue in Rotorua than Tauranga? Is that a broad assumption?
So through you, Chair, the challenge in Rotorua with our current timetable is that drivers end up going or getting very close to their maximum driving hours. So then they have to take a mandated break. And unfortunately, that in Rotorua is a significant driver of our missed trips. That has been exacerbated recently because of the congestion that Jamie's mentioned. So the driver's spending more time on the road and then has to take a break, and they have to cancel some runs as a consequence.
Western Bay of Plenty also down 5% on Q2 of previous year, however, just about 1%. For benchmark, however, so if we see it again next month, then definitely those conversations will happen.
Just, I've been alerted that the sound on the live stream isn't excellent, and staff are working to get it improved. Thank you. Carry on, Jamie.
Thank you, Chair. Q2 in Eastern Bay of Plenty, down just over 5% on Q2 of the previous year. Year to date, passengers down about nearly 4%. Interregional network, this is the last time we're reporting on interregional network. Following the PTC direction on the 24th of September 24, the interregional tertiary and commuter services were discontinued as of December 2024. This will be the last time we report. On demand, passengers down, but fare box recovery ratio slightly up due to the change in customer mix. All patronage types decreased, but there is a large decrease in children who ride for free at peak times, meaning fare paying customers, adults represent the high proportion. With the demand map, you'll see there's now 7 new stops by the hospital, represented by the yellow, just showing a bit more granularity.
Jamie, can you explain that as to what is that geographical demand map really showing us?
Where the trips start and finish, Chair. Where the greatest passengers are coming from. So the larger the circle suggests more. So the big green patch will be equal, where the yellow will be the hospital.
Okay, Councillor Neves, did you?
My question's been answered, thank you.
The one that on demand, the concept of actually empty kilometres utilisation is, how do you measure? I'm not saying how do you measure it, but how do you, when we look for efficiency and effectiveness, is there any learnings from that?
Yes, Chair. Refinement of the on-demand service to reduce the vehicle non-utilisation kilometres without riders on board continues. However, this will only shift the results so far. To achieve bigger shifts, the key levers will be to increase patronage or to remove a vehicle from service so that the actual vehicles out there move more. This comes with the downside of an increase in customer waiting time.
Through you, Chair. So behind the scenes, staff have been doing a lot of work to try and increase that utilisation. If you look at the graph on page 32 of your agenda, you will see that that the number of empty kilometres proportionally is decreasing slightly over time. But as Jamie said, there's only so much we can do. A lot of it is tied to the size of the zone and the number of vehicles operating within it. Just to let members of the committee know, so this reporting only goes up to the end of December, which was a shorter month in terms of passengers because of the Christmas break. As of the end of last week, we had carried just under 40,000 passengers over the trial period, and last week was actually a record week for us. We carried 1,029 people over the week.
So that's a blue light, red, yeah, blue light. And I think we need to celebrate it. A record week for the on-demand, patronage. We know that we're I think in April we're doing a fare change to try and get the private take up. But 1,029 when we looked at what the big bus service was prior to that going in there, that's fantastic. And so full marks to staff, because that's operational, and but we really appreciate it.
Have we increased the fare? Is the
Up to April.
right?
But when you remember that all that increase in the fare, they could survey the customer. The reaction was, looking like the customers recognised it's a very good service. So,
Accessible transport, so mobility trips 33,500, up 1% on the prior quarter, up 23% on the same quarter in the prior year. TM continues to grow membership and usage reflected in these figures. A similar situation throughout the country in response to the increase in subsidy rate in 2022.
Jamie, accessibility transport, I remember Councillor Thurston has been adamant that 1 in 4 of us are disabled.
I think it's 1 in 5.
It's now 1 in 6, actually. I just Stats News. I invite people to look at the latest report out of Stats New Zealand that came out last week, and it details a very good breakdown of disability in that report, and youth in particular. I think youth is something like 24% overall. So disabilities, it's the definitions of disability, but mental health, all those things are brought into account for it.
Chairman, as we know, they have to be assessed to access this, but for me, this is flag waving. It's to be trumpeted, it's good news, it's all about access and inclusion, and we should be patting ourselves on the back, quite frankly.
Further on total mobility, off the back of a fantastic procurement program run by the team last year, we've seen an excellent increase in whakatane by increasing the suppliers by 100% to provide two. These graphs show total mobility by a funding source, 25% being SURF funded, the remainder by local share and Okate.
Yes, councillor
Just
Crowther.
probably the good time to ask that the SURF funding, do we know what the likelihood of that continuing? I know there's a comment later in the agenda just referring to it, but I'm just trying to understand, like, have there been discussions or are we just waiting for central government to make an announcement around that?
Through you, Chair, it's the latter, Councillor Crowther, so we're awaiting guidance on that. We do have Gary Maloney from NZTA on Zoom. I don't know if Gary's got anything else to add to that. The other thing I'd say is we do have item 9.4, a more substantial discussion around our review of total mobility. So we'll be looping back to that later in the meeting.
Any comment, Gary?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, no, I don't have anything to add. I mean, government hasn't signalled that it's ending, so I think we just keep going.
Thank you.
Public transport related tickets, just over 4,000 for Q2, with the same number for Q2, a similar number for Q2 in the previous year. This represents 24% of the total tickets received by council, and a reduction of 8% from Q1.
What is that? Can we just go back to that graph? When you say customer experience, customer service tickets created, is this, explain to me what that actually is.
Yes, Chair. This is through our Zendesk, where our ratepayers contact us to talk through multiple, any challenges they're finding with council.
So it could be a challenge, but could it be positive as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's quite raw data, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Could be 60% positive and 40% negative, or the other way around.
Yeah, through you, Chair, you'll recall from previous Arataki reports where we do split out the type of ticket. That is quite laborious analysis to do, but we do propose to do that on a less frequent basis. That a lot of those bits of customer contact are queries relating to timetables, but a portion of those will, of course, be complaints and feedback and suggestions as well.
Final slide around financial performance. Q2 year-to-date total operating surplus variance is sitting at $1.4 million favourable. Operating revenue is about $2.1 million lower than budget, and offset by operating expenditure of $3.5 million lower than budget.
All right.
Thank you.
Very good report, thank you. Can we have a mover and seconder to receive the Arataki report, please? Councillor Nees, Councillor Crowther, all those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you very much. We now move on to Chairman, the Chair's report on page 39. And who's presenting that?
Through you, Chair, my colleagues Andrew Williams and Simon Bell will take you through the salient points in the Chair's report.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, councillors and representatives. You've already pointed out, Mr. Chair, that the report starts on page 39 of the agenda. It's a fairly varied list of topics, so I wonder if I might pause between sections for questions. But mainly it's for information on previously raised issues and decisions taken. So to start with, you may be aware that there's been a temporary disablement of bike racks on our public transport network, and that's across the country. It was following some concerns raised by the NZTA in October last year, following which the Bus and Coach Association issued a notice of intention to remove bike racks from service because they are non-compliant. As a result of this, the PTAs moved fairly quickly to remove bike racks from service from the 9th of November until additional legal clarity is provided by NZTA and the industry. In the months since, a significant amount of work's been done by a working group made up of industry, the Bus and Coach Association and NZTA, and we've now got an agreed methodology to assess headlight interference from bike racks. So now a significant amount of work has to be undertaken to make the measurements on the buses, assess the risk, and then cost up the solution. So there've been several solutions identified to address the non-compliance, which includes exemptions for daytime use and vehicle modifications. And in the interim, PTA's requested a class exemption from NZTA for daylight use only. We haven't had that decision yet. It's expected over the next few weeks. That approach would come with significant challenges around how to effectively police during daylight hours and that dusk period, and how we communicate that with customers. So it's probably not our preferred approach, and some regions have indicated that they're not going to go ahead with that. Our staff are working with operators to understand the level of non-compliance across our fleet, and we've got a lot of information already, just finalising the costs so that we can bring them to the annual planning meeting coming up. We anticipate it'll be under $200,000, but we don't have any clue on that. NZTA, we don't have any detail on that just yet, and we'll advise closer to the time. We've been advised by NZTA that we will not be issued with new funding, but that we can use existing budget to defray that cost.
The bike racks on buses has been quite successful, in my opinion, in the past. So when you say it's not a preferred to have daylight, if it's a matter of having a bike rack or not, it would appear to me that we've got to think about our customers and what they want. So I'm just querying, I know it might not be ideal, but isn't it better to have it during the day than not at all?
Through you, Chair, it's something that would need careful consideration, and if that exemption is approved by NZTA, it's something that would either be brought back to this committee or the regional council for some guidance. You are right, Chair. On one side, we're providing a service to our community that many people value. The other thing is that a lot of people that use the bike racks perhaps cycle one way to work and then use the bus to take their bike home, or vice versa. And with the changing of daylight hours, that means that in the summer, you can pretty much carry your bike at all hours of service. But in the winter, we'd have to be telling people from about 5 o'clock that they couldn't carry their bike. So we've got to think of the customer, but we've also got to think of the drivers and how we enforce that, and how we, whether we feel that we can educate people so they understand the rules. As I say, if we end up in that position, we will likely pull together an options paper and get some guidance from either the committee or the regional council.
I think staff have shown a can-do approach to transport, and rather than a can't-do, and I want you to keep thinking in that light. So well done for the work so far. So I've got Mayor Denia, Councillor Kurak, and then Councillor Malcolm.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just think we might need to apply a bit of a political lens on that last comment about the daytime running. I mean, how's the conversation going to go? So we can't put bikes on the front of buses because they block headlights. But you don't need headlights in daytime, and then you just go, it's all too difficult, and it just makes us look like idiots.
Yes.
So, let's just have a little bit of political sense on this one, because we'll get slaughtered for that kind of response.
Thank you. Councillor Kurak.
Mine is a question, Ollie. How was it picked up? Was it through a COF process, or how was it raised initially with NZTA?
So through you, Chair, my recollection was that the agency put out a bulletin asking operators to double check that headlights were not obstructed. At the time that bulletin was put out, there was no methodology suggested as to how you actually measure headlight obstruction. And then that then led to the process of operators taking a risk-averse position, effectively assume non-compliance until proved otherwise. And then that has led to the industry group being formed that Simon mentioned, where we all work together to understand what an appropriate methodology would be to then get a measure on the level of non-compliance across the country.
Interesting, given that the bike racks have been operating for a long time, many years. What would it be, like 7 or 8 years, or how long? Been rolling down the road with the skewered headlights.
Yeah, through the chair, like with a lot of rules, as time goes on, there's further clarity added, there's further definitions applied. So it's just that with this one, it's got to a point where it's been determined that there needs to be a hard and fast measure as to understanding whether a headlight is obstructed or not. Previously, that wasn't as explicitly stated.
So we have Councillor Campbell, then Councillor Nees.
Thank you, Chair. I'm aghast of this, actually, to be honest. I'm with Mayor Dean. We're going to look really, really stupid. Whatever happened to Kiwi ingenuity? You take the bloody rack from the front and put it on the back, like the old days, when we all had our bikes hanging off the back of a bus, even to go to school. I just, although somebody will find out a reason why they can't see the tail light then, I guess. But, this is just mind-blowing that the whole country has come to a standstill because somebody's finally, oh, Jesus, it'll obscure. I'm just looking at 3 photos here on the previous report, and how a bike obscures the light, I just do not know. I ride a bike all the time. And I know what it's like carrying a bike on the back of a car. I just find it amazing. Why don't we just take the racks off the front and put them on the back? Or is that impossible?
Does
For most
Gary-
Kiwis, it's not. But
Gary, you want to comment?
No, Mr. Chairman, I think, there are issues about being on the back. At least with a rack on the front, your driver knows that the passenger's there, and when they're taking the rack off, when it's on the back, they don't. You'll probably know anything standing more than a metre from the back has to have a flag on it. Yeah.
Gary, I've got to interrupt there. Most buses have got cameras on the back that I see. I sit behind buses in town here, and the lights, they've all got a bus camera on the back. So,
Councillor Nees.
I don't want to sound critical, but our buses are big enough and there are few enough people on them in the evening when it's dark that I cannot see why you could not take your bike on the bus to get it home if that was the situation. I just think there's other ways of dealing with it. It just gobsmacks me that it's, sorry, you cannot use your bus because you can't. We don't want to be refusing you to actually bring your bike on the bus. I mean, it's crazy. If we were full at night and the bikes were going to be a nuisance to the public, then I'd say, well, yeah, it makes sense, but certainly doesn't make sense when there's very few people on the bus.
Councillor Thurston.
Just an answer to Councillor Kurak. I think it would be nice to record in the minutes Councillor Catherine Stewart from TCC, because she was the champion for this. I think you're right, it was about 7 or 8 years ago, but Catherine really had the bit between her teeth on this issue, and I think we can thank her for getting it in the first place. So it'd be good to note that in the minutes. Thanks so much.
I think the important thing for this committee is to just give a signal that we're looking for a pragmatic, realistic outcome. And this is getting into the weeds for us. It's not strategic, but the strategic part is we do want bikes, racks on buses continued, and our staff to do best endeavours to find a way.
Through you, Chair, just as a small update, so this report was finalised just over a week ago. Since that, we have started to receive the clarity from our operators as to the extent of the challenge, and we are in the process of writing a paper which will be going to the annual plan workshop of the Regional Council later this month. With a proposed solution, should it be supported by the Regional Council. So we are going to be putting forward a pathway to reinstating these bike racks with the support of Regional Council in the near future.
Thank you. Moving on.
Chair. Moving on to school services in the current calendar year. As previously noted to this committee, we are maintaining 2024 school services with no change throughout this calendar year, and due to fiscal constraints and so on. We have been monitoring fairly closely and working with principals as we move through the initial part of the year to understand where issues are arising. And where possible, we've made some minor adjustments that are cost neutral. And in the last week, we've noticed the feedback's died down a lot. So I think that's been reasonably successful. And as you're probably aware, there's a comprehensive review of school services in train at the moment to assess funding and explore service improvements, with oversight provided by the Tauranga and Western Bay Plenty Transport Committee. Direction will be sought from Regional Council around funding parameters to inform that work as well.
No comment, but just from my point of view, this is a big funding issue for us, and it will need to be managed. We've made some base decisions on fares, which I see we put a media statement out in the last few days. And the school, we do have to get private share up, and the biggest impediment to doing so is the school service. So we can expect, if we don't get our comms right, we can expect quite a bit of noise come the beginning of next year. So just a challenge to staff to really think through the comms strategy for that. And it is really, it's not affordable. The status quo is not affordable from a ratepayer point of view, let alone the government have said that they won't support it. Our current fare recovery. Thank you. Move on.
Moving on to 2.3 fares review, tying in nicely there. So in 2024, a fare review project aimed to simplify, make more equitable and improve fare box recovery in line with ministerial expectations was initiated. On December 11th, Regional Council approved the new fare structures as recommended by this committee, with implementation to be mid-2025 in alignment with the national ticketing solution. There were some slight boundary adjustments in the Western Bay sub-region following that decision, and that was to provide more fare equity in that area. Staff have undertaken that work and that will be brought through. Discussions with NZTA on fare box recovery targets are ongoing, as alluded to earlier. Regional Council will consider the proposed targets at the meeting scheduled for late March.
And we're still on the fares.
Thank you.
Virginia.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, could you just explain what changes were made between our recommendation and the adoption by Regional Council? Was it just the zones, and what changes in zones were made? Was there any other changes?
Yep. So through the chair, the Regional Council were given the option of two options for Western Bay, which the boundaries for that were widened. So originally, I think Ollie might be best in terms of the actual geographic areas, but they're now from Manatā right through to Waihi Beach. If served correctly on option 2.
So at the meeting on the 11th of December, the regional council asked staff to explore a more equitable zoning system in the Western Bay. That was given the size of the zones in the Eastern Bay and the comparative smaller nature of the zones in the Western Bay. And as Andrew has said, when we brought that back on the 13th of February, council were provided with 2 options. The option that council went with looked at implementing a per kilometre rate that was more in line with the rates in the Eastern Bay. So what that meant was that the zone that originally encompassed Tauranga City and Te Puna was widened out to also include Omokoroa to the north. And then given that we'd expanded it to the north, it was also extended to the south, so encompasses Te Puke, Makatu as well, off the top of my head.
And then one more zone from Omokura to Waihi Beach, is that? right?
Yeah, through you, Chair, you are correct, Mayor. So we also merged the Katikati and Waihi Beach zones in the proposal that the Public Transport Committee last saw. Those were 2 separate zones.
Councillor Crowler?
Yeah, in those changes, when I look at the way it works out, I can see a logic for the Western Bay, but the impact is that you pay $5 to go from Tauranga to Rotorua, but you pay $14 to Whakatane from Tauranga, and it's only another 15K or something, and it just seems to pardon me, to go from 2 zones of travel to 5. Well, actually it says 5, but when you look at the map it's 4, so I do think you might want to check whether you've got the right number there, but either to $12 or $14, it seems quite inequitable, and again it sort of penalises the Eastern Bay, as often is the case in public transport. And I'm comparing that, for instance, to a Potiki to is it Potaka, where you're travelling a further, I think it's 130K or something, and you pay $8, and I sort of go, well, I think there'd be a lot more people going between Tauranga and Whakatane, and it's just I can't understand why we've got that inequity there.
Through the Chair, so since the withdrawal of the tertiary services, we do not have any public transport services running between Tauranga and Rotorua. So whilst I acknowledge that there is a perceived inconsistency there, what I would say is that now we've got the basis of a zonal structure in place, and the staff's proposal, which is yet to be put to the committee or regional council, is that we review our fare levels and any other wider stuff on an annual basis. With those foundations in place, it would mean that in the future, if a Tauranga to Rotorua service was explored, there would be the opportunity to consider updating that zonal structure if it was felt that that was inequitable.
Yeah.
I love the irony that we've cancelled the service, so it doesn't have an impact. But the other thing is the timing. When we signed off on it at this committee, my understanding was that we agreed to the 3 to 6:30 PM that Super Gold Card would not be able to get that, and that's what's flowed through. But I don't believe the paper we got had the time frame for the time of travel discount. And now you've got this weird thing where the 50% discount for anyone kicks in at 2:30. The Super Gold stops being cheap at 3, but then at 6 o'clock, the reduced, half price travel kicks in again for everyone, but the Gold Card, you've got to wait till 6:30. And it just seems, in terms of our messaging, it's going to be really complex to, people will be all over the show, especially if they have a Super Gold Card, or a community services card. And, I think ideally it'd be really nice if it could be aligned. And I'm wondering is there a narrative that you can provide us of why you chose 2:30 and 6?
We will take that away, Councillor. Through the Chair, I think that is a typographical error. We changed the off-peak discount time to 2:30, given the early finish time of some schools. I can't see any reason, and I certainly agree with your logic, Councillor, that we should be looking for a uniform approach so we can simplify our messaging.
Can I say also that I was disappointed in the decision with the choosing of the zoning, and I didn't have current research, but in the 2021 year, I did analyse the true cost of trip per passenger, and yes, that is affected by if you increase your passengers, it brings everybody's trip down. But in 2021, and I've asked staff if they could update this, 2021, just so you know, Western Bay, for instance, the COP was the highest cost at $64.94 per trip per passenger in 2020 and 2021 in that financial year, versus $13.37 for Tauranga, $24.35 for Wakatani, and $15.11 for Rotorua. Tauranga schools, the true cost is $5.30, was then $5.36. So yes, on a per kilometre, get your equity right is one thing, but when we look at private share and how we manage it, I don't think we've got it right yet on the, and I remember your comment at the last meeting when we talked about zones and you're wondering about cutting down the zone within Tauranga, and we because of the distance, and then suddenly we've gone, instead of cutting it down, we've increased out to Makatū and gone as far as Omakara, when the discussion in the meeting was to Te Puna and no change the other way. But I think, what we as, I don't know what the right answer is. That's what I want staff to keep working on. But it doesn't, when we're looking at recovery of our costs, the user's getting a pretty damn good deal based on what it was, and it might have changed. So because patronage has increased, so those rates will have come down. But it was horrendous, just saying. And welcome, Susan. Thank you for coming on board. Notice we did put your apology for lateness.
Thank you.
Moving on to an interrelated issue, national ticketing solution, which I'm sure everybody's aware is a unified public transport ticketing solution that will be rolled out across the entire country with a brand Motu Move. In our particular region, we're anticipating that it's going to include contactless card payments, transit cards, similar to the B card, cash, and eventually with Apple Pay and Google Pay coming in later. Staff are in the planning stage for our local response project, and we are expecting go live in this region to be mid to late 2025. Our key work streams include financial system configuration, customer experience, and basically the change control process for that, and everything's progressing well. The national rollout challenges could cause delays in our local region. I think that needs to be made really clear because the interrelationship with the fares rollout will be delayed by any delays in that project.
Councillor Nees and then Councillor Kure.
Thank you. With regard to the ability to pay with contactless debit cards and credit cards, etc., is this per ride or per just for the top up of the Motu Move?
For the chair, that will eventually be per ride. So you'll tag on and tag off using your debit or credit card.
Right. So I'm noticing more and more businesses charging surcharge for contactless payments. I don't know if other people are noticing that trend as well. So what is our position? Have you thought through what our position is going to be with that? Or are we going to absorb that cost, which I presume would further reduce our private share?
So through you, Chair, the fare will be the fare, so there will be no surcharge added. People will pay whatever the posted fare is. with our current system, there are administrative back office costs associated with the administration of that, and it will be the same for the Motu Move system. So part of that administration and back office cost will include the cost of facilitating those payments.
It'd be really good to see at some point what the cost per per wand of a card is, because if we've got 3 million trips a year, it actually could be quite a substantial cost to council. So I'd like to have some understanding of that at a future meeting, please.
Through the chair, we can certainly bring that back for you, Councillor Nees. One thing I would say, an advantage with Motu Move is it's a national system, so there are the economies of scale. These agreements are being negotiated at a national level, so we're hoping that will bring some advantages to us in terms of the costs of administering and maintaining that system.
I can just say before I go to Councillor Currick that something to be aware of. I was in Sydney using exactly that system late last year, and I think it was late last year, might have been this year. And my wife and I both clicked on, clicked off at the same place, both. And she was with BNZ and I was with Westpac. Hers cost, when it came through to New Zealand, her cost for that one particular trip was $6 something. Mine was $9 something. So there's a, and that's in the banking system, I think, not, and that's probably currency and whatever, but it was ridiculous. That needs addressing if we have that issue. It's something to be alluded to for. Sorry, I digress. Councillor Currick.
So we've been referring to physical credit cards, but most people, I think, these days use the contactless phone. And I read here Apple Pay and Google Pay, which is on a device. So before that's implemented, it doesn't indicate a time frame, but when it's first rolled out, can people use their phone, or is it just credit card?
Through the chair, no, they won't be able to use their phone for contactless payment in the first iteration. There will be a phased rollout for that, and it'll be well communicated, and the customer experience will be well thought through.
And why the delay? It seems like it's simple technology that's widely used elsewhere. And why the differentiation between contactless on the card versus the phone? I know Apple Pay and Google Pay, it's a bit different because it goes through an apps type thing, but a bit of an explanation around that, please.
Through the chair, so this system is being developed nationally. There are different versions. We are likely to get what's been described as version 2, and then subsequent versions will follow. With those subsequent versions, we'll get more and more functionality. It's effectively the system being developed and then being rolled out whilst they're still developing it. So we're hopeful that advanced functionality will come relatively quickly, but with the version that we're getting, we'll be able to use PayWave on the buses. You'll be able to also get a Motu Move card similar to a B card. So for example, children don't have to carry an FPass card or cash, they can have something separate. And then we look forward to that advanced functionality as it comes.
In terms of comms, when you advise the public that you can use contactless, it will be made clear that's only a card and not your phone, because I can imagine people rocking up, oh, this is great, doesn't work.
Yes, through the chair, to Ollie's point, a lot of that communication will come from the nationally led project, and then it'll be tailored for our local rollout timeframes. And so, the communications work stream in our project is working through exactly that right now.
So you said that it's going to plan. I wonder if Susan with the NZTA could comment on, because originally we were going go live in June, and then it's now looking like it could be a couple of months after that. And because it ties in with our fare box, our fare adjustment, it's, it's important to us. Can you give us any light on, are you having, is it all going to plan, Susan, or, are there issues? Are we likely to get later than August, or we don't sort of have a definitive date yet?
Thanks for the question. I'm going to let Gary jump into this one. He's more across this than I am around that level of detail.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, as you know, they're currently rolling the system out in Christchurch, and I don't have any update in terms of what that means for the rest of the country. I'm happy to follow that up with the NTS team and come back to Oliver if that would help.
Thank you.
Through you, Chair, further to Gary's comments, given that we are anticipating going live this year, we expect that sort of the implementation timeframes will be confirmed relatively soon. So I would hope that by the next meeting of this committee, we will have some much firmer timeframes that we'll be able to share with you.
Moving on.
Yeah, through the chair. So the Tauranga Public Transport Operations Facility, which is a bit of a mouthful, our bus layover in Tauranga CBD. Work is well underway with consenting almost completed. The tender process will be completed by the 21st of March. We will bring on a contractor beyond that point to commence works from the 1st of April when we take over the site. We're working quite closely with the City Council on this one, in particular with their shift for the Durham Street bus stops to the south. And as part of that, we have taken the opportunity to make some cost savings. So you'll see there's 3 bullet points there on page 42, so 43, which points out the key changes being the amalgamation of routes 70 and 71, and also the removal of 3 outbound morning trips on the route 52X, which brings in probably a cost saving of around 200K per annum, give or take. Yeah, thank you.
Crowther.
Question around the amalgamation of 70 and 71. Can you just explain and also decode what it meant, the inbound, outbound split problematic for customers? I've never found it a problem, but I'm wondering what that refers to.
So through the chair, the route 70 and 71 essentially will be amalgamated into what is largely the route 71, which runs from the CBD up through Brookfield along Otamoto Road, and then serves a circular route through Matua and back that way. So the one that runs along Ngātai Road is the one that would be largely dropped, but it's also served by a number of other routes, including the Route 60. Yeah.
Through the chair, just in addition to Andrew's comments there, so this change is something that was part of our proposed Tauranga Phase 2 refresh. So that is where this proposal has come from, and it reflects the fact that other than, I think, 1 trip per day on the 70 is very poorly patronised, especially in off-peak periods. So we were looking for the opportunity to make some efficiencies and remove some runs which are not carrying many passengers. I think it averages less than 1 passenger per trip outside of peak times. To your other comment around the inbound outbound split, so it might not be obvious to passengers, but technically that route ends at Cherrywood and then continues around Matua. However, for most runs of the day, it's the same bus that does both. So the customer is not aware of that quirk in the timetable. However, I think there are 2 runs a day where the driver finishes their shift at Cherrywood, and therefore if there are passengers on the bus trying to get to Matua, they have to alight the bus and then wait for the replacement service that is then going to continue that. And that is
a real bone of contention for passengers, which are quite rightly inconvenienced and frustrated by that. So we've looked to completely design that out of our timetabling for the benefit of those Matua passengers.
Thank you for that. I know it's jumping a bit into the weeds, but it was sort of helpful from a local ward councillor to understand that. Thank you.
Councillor Currick?
Sure, from the bus driver's perspective, that facility will be welcomed, particularly the toilet facilities. But looking at the picture there on page 45, so the driver facility would be like a little mini kitchen, I assume, some seating that you can, they can chat or whatever. Do you know what that, the detail?
Yep, so that's through the chair, that's the driver's facility. So that includes a kitchen and a separate set of toilets, which we're required to provide within a certain distance of where the buses are laying over. Yeah.
Just while we're on that section, it's probably the time to bring up the Route 40 and to get a feel. Do we have a problem coming Tauranga City with the Welcome Bay service through Turret Road, 15th Avenue?
I draw the short straw. Yes, I think we have a serious problem coming. And I don't know at a staff level who's talked to who, to be honest, but I'm told that our staff are in contact with your council staff at regional. But I think we've got a major issue. And I think we have to first get our head around whether the plan for the bridge will work. So we understand that it's highly likely to, and the width of it has been assessed, but and there's even been some, sort of core samples taken in the past, but they haven't actually assessed whether it's going to cope with the extra weight of the extra lane on it or something. I think they have to do a little bit more work to confirm that. If that's a go, that's one scenario. But if it's a no-go, we have a serious problem with that project. So we're hoping that's not the case. I guess we just deal with that at the time and figure out what to do. We'd still, I believe, 4-lane all of 15th Avenue. We just have to probably reassess what to do with Turret. If it's a go with the bridge, then the next issue is, will the bridge be closed for significant chunks of time, either for so many hours per day or for, what extreme scenario would be for so many days, just shut down. Now, when you look at the congestion on State Highway 29A, I think it's let's say, it'd be a challenging scenario to add more traffic to where there's already a huge problem with traffic congestion. So in terms of the buses, the question is, can we do something a bit innovative? I know, some of the councillors here most of you would have been involved when the trial happened. I think you were on TCC2, Rick, at that time, to try to get more people going from Welcome Bay through to the schools, etc. in the morning. Now, can we do anything to prioritise buses through there if we close it off to general traffic? I don't know. Could we put a park and ride somewhere to try and incentivise people to take the bus? Could we look at a more attractive package somehow at the other end? All those, to me, are just a whole lot of questions, which I think people like Councillor Currick and I have raised, but I think it's early days in that discussion. But I think it'd be really helpful personally to have a governance discussion around it between the councils, but also maybe a workshop between the councils to figure out what's realistic and what's not realistic there.
I see it as a key issue, and we do need to be ahead of it, not behind it. And that's why I raise it at this meeting, just to alert, we don't want to get into the weeds, but we alert staff that we see it as a key issue, and ask you to make sure that we, as you say, workshop it or do something to find solutions, and come back to us with options, because I think it will affect that service dramatically.
Through you, Chair, can assure you, Councillor Crowther, that staff are talking about this. It is a challenge for the whole transport system, not just public transport, and we need to understand how we can best mitigate the challenges whilst that corridor is being upgraded. Mr. Chair, you might want to consider sending this matter to the Tauranga and Western Bay Joint Transport Committee. That committee, at your discretion, might be well placed to discuss this further, potentially workshop it, and then perhaps staff, once we understand some more details about the project, because there's still quite a few unknowns, can bring some material to that committee for discussion.
I will just quickly add, the other thing is that came back to life, brilliant. We had some funding in the long-term plan for the next financial year to deliver improvements to Fraser Street, and I think there was Oropi Road, etc. So the idea was I'm not actually quite sure what it will do, but I'm told it is to make improvements to the arterial corridors that will be utilised by people trying to avoid the congestion from Turret Road. So that, to my understanding, is still in our annual plan. So we've had to make cuts to a number of transport projects, but that's something that I've raised as a key concern, that those projects not be cut if they're going to help to deal with the impacts of that project. So hopefully that's a small bit of reassurance.
Councillor Currick.
And also, apart from the inter-council staff involvement, TCC has taken the procurement approach with early contractor involvement. That means there are more heads that actually know on the ground stuff to actually minimise disruption, because it's the traffic management which is the critical piece, and getting those people in the room early in the piece around even designing and the work program, etc., will certainly help, because we're all aware of it, and we'll do everything we can do. And I think it's a good idea to put this to the joint committee for discussion as well, because we're all in it together.
Well, Councillor Mead.
Just a comment, because I now live in Oahuaiti, I do not go right coming out of Oahuaiti to go around through Turret Road because of the amount of congestion, and because I go early to the gym in the morning to avoid the traffic, and then I see all the traffic on my way back home. It's already almost at overcapacity. And what I'm also noticing is that the roundabout at Windermere and the roundabout at Mangatapu are both starting to fail, where people find themselves stranded at the end of traffic right across the intersection. And so therefore, when the lights phase, nobody can come through anyway, because there's still cars that haven't cleared, that have come through around the roundabout and have got nowhere to go. So I think we've got serious problems with the congestion at the moment. And I just shudder to think what it's going to be like when one prime route is partially closed down.
We'll bring a recommendation at the end of the presentations. Moving on.
Through the chair, I wonder if we might move past the on-demand trial, because we covered a lot of that in the Arotaki presentation around the peak numbers and so on. Okay, so moving on to the final item, which is the security, mainly in the CBD in Tauranga. So over the period November 24 to January 25, so the holiday period, we noticed that the public transport related incidents decreased by 45% when compared to the preceding 3 months. Now, part of that might be around people being out of the city and enjoying the weather elsewhere, but there were new security guards deployed with additional targeted training at Durham Street interchange between 12 and 9 p.m. over summer. And that was in response to patterns seen in previous years with antisocial behaviour. The Tauranga security contract has now been extended through to December this year, with weekday coverage in the CBD from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. on weekdays. Finally, staff working closely with Rotorua Lakes Council in a city wellbeing team to explore the deployment of their safe city guardians as a trial on Rotorua City Ride Network.
So we have Mayor Denyer, then councillor Crowler.
So I just like to ask, will there be any implications from the government's new rules around citizens' arrests? Potentially give security guards an extra tool in the box to detain those doing criminal activity. My understanding was that previously the security guards couldn't actually do a great deal, but now with these powers, they potentially could. So just interested in where that might end up.
Through the chair, we'd probably need to take that one away and work through the implications and in conjunction with the contract holder.
For an answer right now, but it's something to think about that could make a difference. There's another tool in the box, as I said.
Councillor Crowther.
I'm just interested in the 10 o'clock to 6 p.m. I'm struggling to see why there'd be more of a demand between 10 to say, 1 p.m. or something like that, compared to the evening hours. And, as a user there, I've never sort of noticed any incidents. Do you have evidence or reports that there are incidents between, say, 10 a.m. and midday?
We monitor that regularly, and I imagine that decision was taken in light of the trends coming out of there. Probably won't say any more than that because there is the Ministry of Social Development office right there, and that may be around busy times, but that's supposition. So
that was part of my thinking is, are we, or not probably you, I should say, to Regional Council paying for something that another organisation should be paying for?
I can tell you from a governance perspective, we were reticent to pay for that, but the city, who we believe was the responsibility of the commissioners, wouldn't have a bar of it.
I was meaning a government agency as well. If that's the reason why in the middle of the day, do they need security there as opposed to that's, I guess it's a circular argument in a way, so I'll leave it.
They do have security standing outside their building, but they're not going to be policing our bus stops, I'm afraid.
All right. So that's the end of your report. We're just getting some wording for that recommendation. Just give us a second. After we've moved this report, I think we'll have a quarter of an hour morning tea break. There's morning tea available at the back of the room.
So through you, Chair, just whilst Claudia's bringing up the suggested resolution, further to Councillor Crowther's comments about this being a bit of an evolving piece in terms of understanding the challenge that we're likely to face. I'm not sure whether this will come to the next meeting of the Joint Transport Committee. That committee does meet more frequently than the PTC. It meets every other month, but as soon as there is substantial material there to discuss with that committee, we will bring something.
Oh, sorry. I guess my comment on that would be, this has been pushed out by our council a couple of times already. And I understand why you, as a manager, would suggest that. But I think from a governance perspective, I'm completely with the chair. I think we need to get ahead of this, and I'm worried as the countdown's on now, that if we don't start actually having a sort of strategic view of it, because I think we need to rule out a number of options that are going to that. Well, I think from my perspective, there are some things that are talked about that I don't think are going to work. So I think it'd be nice to sort of push those to one side and then go, right, of the ones left, you know, what do you as staff need to go away and report back on? So to me, it wouldn't worry me if we didn't have a solid report on this. It's more just an opportunity to somehow have a discussion. And if we have to do an offline discussion, that's fine as well, whatever you recommend.
Yeah, completely agree with that, councillor. I think it's just, I don't think staff will be able to come back with detailed, costed, tested options for the next meeting, but we can absolutely support a discussion.
So you
Chairman, would it not be good to have a workshop on this? You know, putting on my regional transport committee hat. I know we've got a workshop coming up with the joint committee to talk about school buses and PT in general. But I think the magnitude of this problem that's coming with regards to Turret Road, I think it justifies a workshop between ourselves and our colleagues at TCC to thresh out this issue once and for all.
Well,
or kick it off, I should say.
Yeah,
And
and
I'm not
think-
getting into the weeds here,
Yeah,
I can assure you.
No, but this, the wording there isn't prescriptive of
No.
how we, it's actually just getting it highlighted to
Yeah.
that committee
Yeah,
that we are
this is a
concerned.
work stream for the
Yeah.
officers, but I
Yeah.
I would like to request that we have a separate workshop to discuss with our colleagues at TCC, and Western Bay may wish to also be there, of course.
Yeah.
To thresh out this issue, and I'd certainly make time for it and be happy to host it or yourself, so. I think, you know, put all the issues on the table and, you know, look at the magnitude of the problem that's coming our way. I'd be happy to move that way.
Right, so you want to amend this?
That's a separate one. To me, that's separate. That's a work stream for the officers
Yeah.
to work closely on more defined costings and whatever of the financial impacts. But in terms of the issue itself, I don't know, I'm guided by TCC colleagues here too, and Western Bay. You know, if you see merit in hosting a round table on this, let's have it, you know, and let's get all these, so every politician's familiar with what's coming at us.
For me, I think what we're doing there is putting the issue to the joint committee, and how the joint committee, you know, I think staff will do that anyway. I don't know if we need a direction, you know, from here to do a work, but it sounds to me like we do need to be brainstorming it from a governance perspective.
That's a completely separate issue to me. That's, you know, I fully support part 2 of those recommendations there, you know, but it's just in terms of a round table. I don't know, do you folks see merit in it, or are you just, I don't know, I'm guided by you councillors from TCC.
Councillor Thurston, what's the timing of the regional transport committee workshop?
Well, it's, do you want the good news or the bad news? Because His Worship and others are all going to be at Zone 2 that day. So we've had to push it out, and as you know, trying to find a date. So the next meeting, I think, is in May. So, but I'm suggesting a round table, be it informal, call it what you like, workshop.
Special workshop
Yes,
on this
to talk about this issue, because I know you guys have got some quite exciting concepts. And well, I've seen them in the media and social media, and, you know, so or potential solutions. But you know, I'm happy to host it as a, you know, or Councillor Von Dedelson, you know.
I'll answer directly through the chair to the question, which is yes, I think that'd be great. And I guess I'd take guidance from staff of both councils as to whether it should be a formal workshop, you know, public workshop or whatever, or whether it should be an informal discussion / workshop, whatever you want to call it. So but the main thing is we get together.
But I don't expect the staff to be presenting high level financial costings, and all. That's another issue that they're working on separately. So.
Through you, Chair, I would imagine that in staff following that second resolution and presenting some high-level options to the joint committee, it will inevitably end up being workshopped. However, if it would provide this committee with comfort that was a separate resolution, then happy for it to be added on, but I think it's inevitable that we'll end up sitting around the table discussing this.
Yeah, I think an informal workshop or round table would be a great conduit into the work that the staff are doing in terms of giving you some clear guidance and philosophical direction from the politicians.
Something to that effect, and at the earliest opportunity, that blah, blah, blah.
I'm happy to move if you'd accept that. We can do a separate resolution later, Claudia, but you've got the thrust of it. You're not enthusiastic.
I'm just
Chairman.
not convinced we need it. That's all, because I think by making a recommendation to the joint committee to look at the thing, I think that that's the inevitable outcome, that it will be workshopped.
Mr. Chairman, you don't need a resolution to have a workshop, so, I mean, that's a discussion offline probably, rather than trying to resolve that we'll have a workshop.
Yeah. Did you get Medinia's comment? He's saying we don't need a resolution to have a workshop, so I think we're just complicating the issue. That can, you know, I would expect that to be an outcome of what we're directing here anyway. And I think we've taken that on board. I think that's my opinion. Do I? That's often a good thing. Okay.
We can have a conversation offline.
Yeah,
So
at this stage, I'm happy to move the resolution as it is sitting on the table. Direct staff, blah, 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 receives the report. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
You'll second that, councillor Thurston. Any discussion on it? All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. We will break now till just after 11:15 for morning tea. But so if we're back, probably we can be back here at 15:15. If you would, so those online, if you come back at 15:15, that'd be great. You can pour your own cup of tea. Okay, we're having technical troubles, but we'll make a start. And we move on to our regional public transport plan review, page 46 of your agenda. And we're having Matthew.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll take it away. Morning, everyone. I'm going to take this paper as largely read, but I do want to highlight a couple of key points in the paper. So the previous review of the RPTP 2022 to 2032 was completed when the Regional Council adopted the RPTP in September 2022. The adoption of the RPTP came with a supporting action plan, which was developed later on. Since September 2022, there have been a number of several significant changes at a national and regional level in the public transport and political and policy space, notably a change of government, a new GPS on land transport, and updated RPTP guidelines. The LTMA requires the RPTP to be reviewed as soon as practically possible after an RLTP is approved. The operative RLTP was approved in June 2024 by the Regional Council. So in light of this, I'm seeking today that the PTC approve a review, as outlined in this report, of the RPTP 2022-32, given the recent adoption of the RLTP and the extent of change in the public transport operating environment. Secondly, I'm noting that development of a regional public transport action plan is not a requirement of this review. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, I open it up for questions. Are there any? Councillor Nees.
I have. I'm very aware that there's a current review of the Land Transport Management Act also underway. And I don't know, Andrew, whether you want to mention to the committee about the letter that the Regional Council sent with regard to including legislation in that to change the PTOM, the public transport operating model. But I just wonder whether we have a definite timeframe for the changes to the Land Transport Management Act because of their significant changes that will affect public transport within that legislation. I wonder whether we'd be wise, perhaps, yes, start doing the scoping on options, but potentially not moving too fast into the review until we know exactly what the Land Transport Management Act is going to look like.
Through you, Chair, a really good question, Councillor Nees. So around PTOM, the requirement for us to be able to procure under the full suite of opportunities that the Sustainable Public Transport Framework permits is an update to NZTA's operational policy around procurement, the agency's procurement manual, and that process, I think that the update to the manual is scheduled to commence this year. The government is considering changes to the Land Transport Management Act, and that is in the government's work plan for this calendar year. However, a lot of those updates are around enabling road user charging and those sorts of things. We haven't seen anything around updates to legislation around the operation or contracting of public transport, although we will get an understanding over the coming months as to whether the current government plans to repeal any of the changes that the previous government made right at the end of its term. Matthew can talk to the timeframes of this review more comprehensively, but my understanding is, given that the government wants to move at pace this calendar year on changes to the LTMA, that those would be able to be fully incorporated into any updates to the regional public transport plan.
That's fine, as long as we are prepared to flex and perhaps push things out a little bit if we're uncertain. I just don't want us to be doing rework.
Councillor Currick.
Just in terms of what you said, Ollie, regarding the repeal aspects from the previous government, what are some of the key ones that potentially could be repealed?
Through you, Chair, these comments are purely speculation. I haven't been privy to any briefings or anything that give me any sort of confidence that this is what the government will do. The previous government introduced some high-level principles into the LTMA through the Amendment Act, which allowed effectively more delegated decision-making to regions, the ability for regional councils, public transport authorities to own assets, particularly buses, which is something that wasn't previously permitted under the Act. So effectively, a reduction in central control. I'm not sure as to whether the current government will consider repealing any aspects of that, but those are the sorts of changes which might not be aligned with what this government wants to do. But as I said, any of that is speculation at this stage.
Can I just say, and then I'll go to Councillor Crowther, we have in our long-term plan for transport, which includes transport planning and it's the full transport suite, not just public transport. And the last year we spent $50 million. This year it's 60 million, and it was going through to 100 million in year 10, and effectively doubling the because of the high degree of targeted rates in this stuff, and doubling the cost to our ratepayers. And one, central government has already signalled that the basis that we had that budget won't be, it has to be reviewed completely. But even our contribution, our ratepayers can't afford a doubling of rates, because of the targeted nature. So it is a big issue, and we also have all our bus contracts across the whole region up for renewal in the next couple of years by 2020 into 2027. So this is a very big issue for us, and we were, our last plan, the 22 plan, was very ambitious on mode share. It was what the government was wanting us to be. So we do need to review it to make sure that it's fit for purpose for the current government. And I've certainly been talking offline to the ministers involved, and they've asked me to email them to bring them up to speed more on the issues around procurement. And Gary and Susan, this is a key issue for us because the procurement framework that we have to operate under, we have got no certainty about that, but it's not workable economically for us as based on the old PTOM, and which was put in place in 2013, and the so it's something that needs work with urgency, and I will certainly be writing to the board of NZTA as well about this issue. So I think I know we can't get, until we get certainty, we need to review, but we can't get finality as to where we're going in the next review period, through this review yet. But I'm absolutely concur that we have to get started and start getting the preparation and put pressure on central government and their board, who NZTA, to facilitate for us so that we can be efficient and effective and get the outcomes for public transport and transport that our communities are looking for, and that aligns with central government funding. If we don't get it aligned with central government, what they want, then we just won't get funding. So, and our ratepayers are not in a position, a lot of them, to pay double their rate. So it's a big issue, and I commend, so I endorse getting on with this work. This is going to be important.
Yeah, very supportive of this. I think it's a great idea. I guess I'm just interested in that we're asked to note that the action plan is not a requirement. But there's a bit of an implication there for me that I'm wondering, does that mean there's not going to be one, or does that, because I guess a plan without an action plan sounds like another thing to put on the shelf, and I'm really keen to see an action plan to deliver some stuff. I know we're under severe constraints, but it'd be nice to. So I'm just wondering if staff could flesh that out for me, please.
Yeah, definitely through the chair. So it's not a requirement. We don't see this not being something that isn't advised. I think it's up to the committee to decide how they want to go through the process. But I think what we're trying to focus on here is delivering an RPTP in the first instance, and then beyond that, probably once we've got the foundation sorted, that's when we look at an action plan or something similar. So definitely not off the cards, just not on the cards today. Yeah.
Any further comments? With that in mind, I think, would someone like to move the recommendations on 46, 47? Councillor Crowther,
Second.
Thurston. Any discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. We move on then to the page 58, I think.
Yep.
And we're going to have Katri. There she is. Has everybody met you, this committee? Katri?
Morena koutou. Thank you, Chair. So, ko Katri taku ingoa. My name is Katri. I'm a transport planner here at Toi Moana. So this report is really a summary update on the progress made towards implementing the current operative Bay Plenty Regional Public Transport Plan, so the RPTP 2022-32. It's the second implementation report after the first implementation and monitoring report was provided to this committee in September last year. Overall, we've seen modest progress being made on the 55 actions in the RPTP, and much of the progress being made are in areas where staff can progress actions under the business as usual approach, utilizing staff time versus larger projects requiring additional funding. Worth noting is that some of the actions are, however, at risk, as they do not align with the government's strategic priorities for transport and therefore have been affected by funding constraints in the National Land Transport Programme, or the NLTP. In terms of next steps, for the RPTP implementation reporting, so we intend to continue to deliver on the projects together with our TLA partners and NZTA, and then report back on progress made to this committee in September. So that's a brief summary of the report. I'm happy to otherwise take the report as read and to answer any questions.
Councillor Crowther.
Thanks, Katri. I'm not sure who this is a question for, but I'm aware that we've got a parking policy paper coming to us soon, I believe, Rick, at our council, and that's obviously something which will have an impact based on, I think it's Action 7.1. So has there been staff level engagement around that, and how do we kind of coordinate together as we address that? Do we sit in our council meeting and make decisions and then have you tell us that that's going to cause chaos with the bus system, and then we have another meeting? I mean, practically, I'm thinking it'd be really good to do something with the joint committee, but I'm wondering if staff have kind of got this covered at your end.
Yep, so through the chair, that's a good question, Councillor Crowther, and we have engaged with staff at your council already on this. We actually met with a number of your staff, and I raised this as a key issue. So I think bringing this to the Western Bay PT table is a great idea. I'm particularly interested in the relationship it has with the fare increases. So I think having that conversation in light of some recent changes and some of the changes that Matthew pointed out in his paper for the RPTP, it's the right time to have that conversation. So we are having it, but I implore the conversation to go further and agree with your position.
Clarify that for those who are not aware, the parking in central Tauranga is not standardised. We've talked about hopefully standardising it over the next year or so, but basically it's a couple of bucks per hour, and we've got that fairly much widespread across for the first 2 hours on street, and then it goes up. But it does tie in with the new fares. If you imagine you go somewhere in the CBD and you have a return bus trip, $3.70 each way under the new fares, that's still cheaper than a couple of hours of parking. So I think we've factored that in, I think, into our, where we've let the parking fares lie. But I think the bigger issue is where they apply across the city. And I think I'd be very interested in input from regional if you have views on that.
Councillor Nee,
Happy to move, actually, Mr. Chair.
what's that?
Happy to move the recommendation.
Yeah.
Second.
So we've got a mover and a second. It's just to receive the report. Yep. No discussion. All in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. And then we move on to page 74, which is the Total Mobility Review 2025 initial investigations. And that's going to be Andrew.
Thank you, and through the chair, apologies, my voice is a little bit raspy today. I'm presenting this good work on the behalf of Claudia, who's been heavily involved in this, so I don't want to take the credit for that. So thank you, Claudia. So Total Mobility is a nationwide scheme that provides subsidised taxi services to people with serious mobility issues. Regional Council is responsible for a large portion of its administration, alongside operators and NZTA. This work has come from us in two ways. We were actually required to review total mobility caps as per NZTA legislation or LTMA legislation, but we're also being asked by the Public Transport Committee to explore how we can make some cost savings and efficiencies within the total mobility space. So to that end, this report is the initial investigations and is phase one of that work. So what you see here is very much just a crises of where things are at and some of the trends. So you'll see that the costs to deliver the service and the popularity of the service are both increasing quite rapidly. And then phase two, we'll look at how we respond and recommend a bunch of options to this committee to take it forward. So beyond that, I'll take the paper as largely read and revert back to the committee for any questions. Thank you.
And before I ask for questions, just say really good to see the benchmarking in this report so that we can actually see what's happening in other districts. It just gives us a bit of a measure as to how we're going. Mayor Denyer.
I've got a couple of questions for me. So for the chair, I noticed on the table on page 80, the Waikato region, the number of registered persons decreased enormously from 21-22 and then to 22-23 and then 23-24. So what went on there?
Through you, Chair, my understanding, but I would need to confirm this, is they had some boundary changes. I think it might have been Taupo, where the responsibility changed between one region and another, but I will have to check that.
I would have thought that the centre of activity is Hamilton and around there, and that Taupo's not, most of the total mobility usage. But okay, I appreciate your comment. And then the other question I had was I guess it's more a philosophical one and interested in your view. So one of the options being proposed is to, or being put up in lights, as you would say, is to introduce restrictions on the frequency or that it can be used. So the philosophical question is, what is the purpose of total mobility? Is it just to provide accessibility for our most vulnerable to do the essentials, or is it for any time they want, regardless? So, getting to and from work and whenever they need it, or just, so they can do the weekly shops. What's our philosophy on that?
Through you, Chair, I think it's relatively safe to say there isn't really that philosophy at the moment. If a person has accessibility challenges to the point where they meet the requirements of the scheme, it is at their discretion how they use that scheme and with what frequency they use it with. As part of this review, I think that does need to be considered as to whether that approach is right and appropriate, or whether an alternative philosophy needs to be explored.
If we are serious about limiting the frequency it can be used, then that will potentially mean you can't use it to get to work, for example. But that's something I think for a future consideration. And my last question was around, you talk about on page 84, the Ministry of Transport is currently undertaking national review of total mobility with the result expected in coming months. Does it make sense to delay our review of total mobility until that national review is completed by the Ministry of Transport?
Through the chair, so yeah, we've seen what the ministry is doing, and at this stage it's relatively high level, but as part of their review, it won't be as far-reaching as coming into the region. So we still have the ability to control where the cap is, and some of those options that are not painted as options in the paper, but are discussed as options of ways to control the growth of the service. So that's not what the ministry will be doing as part of that review, but we will be keeping in touch with the ministry and ensuring that there is no crossover.
Okay, so I mean, as long as we get assurance, I guess, that we don't do a review and then find out it's a complete waste of time because the government's changed their view of the world.
Yeah, definitely a risk that we've realised, not realised, but are monitoring.
Thank you.
Councillor Neave.
Thank you. Just a query about the data on table 4. I notice in the Bay of Plenty in 22-23, we had a huge jump in fares. So it went from 479,900 in 21-22 to 1.2 million in 22-23, and then down to 730,000 in 23-24. Do we have a reason for that?
That's actually a slight mistake in the paper, I believe. So we're part of the review, we'll look at some of the systems that sit behind total mobility. There's actually about 4. So there's RideWise, NZTA's TO, NZTA's dashboard, as well as financial systems within regional councils. So that figure in RideWise is actually 2.1 million. So we can, so there's some discrepancies there. So I think some of those will be teased out in terms of how we actually make sure that the systems are either speaking to each other or which ones we can and can't or shouldn't use to make sure that we are getting exactly the right figures there. So I apologise for that figure.
Just further to Andrew's comments through you, Chair. Whilst it wasn't deliberate to include an error in the paper, it does highlight the fact that we're trying to deliver a relatively complex service across 4 systems that don't talk to each other. And this is a frustration being felt across the country and something that these national reviews will be considering as well. It really does highlight the fact that we are in some elements flying not blind, but it is incredibly difficult to get to the bottom of some of the idiosyncrasies within the systems. And that's why sort of over the past year, we've been able to provide this committee with more and more information as we actually understand exactly what's going on in the depths of those systems.
Just to add to that as well, that figure isn't actually an accuracy. It's accurate in one of the systems, but the other system is saying 2.1. So it's somewhere within 2.1 and that 700,000 figure. So us figuring out exactly what Ollie said, finding how we go about using those figures best, taking it forward as part of the review.
It's really the massive jump from one year to the next and then a big dip. If it's 2.1, that's even worse.
Through you, Chair. The other thing that will be exacerbating these is we did have a big increase in patronage, going from just under 58,000 to just under 83,000 between those 2 years. And it was about the time when the additional subsidy was brought in, so users got further discount on their travel, which did increase demand substantially. So there are some well-known factors behind the scenes that are leading to these big fluctuations in demand. We're hoping to be able to understand that causality in detail through this review.
Councillor Crowther?
Yeah, just following, I think would be helpful for the next meeting just to have maybe a reviewed set of those numbers, because you're right, the boardings are going up each time, and I think Councillor Nees' point is really valid. Like, why is the money not tracking the boarding? So I think whatever system, even if you had a table showing all 4 systems and what they all said, and we just try and get our heads around it, because I mean, to me, there's something not quite right with some of those numbers, and I agree with Meardenia, the Waikato one seems a weird blip as well, so yeah.
And just a clarification through you, Chair, usually when we present financials relating to total mobility, that's coming from council's financial system. So we're looking at, effectively the revenue that we've had in, whereas with this, because we've tried to report at a much more disaggregated level, we've gone into those systems and then uncovered this. So ultimately the correct measure is cash in the bank.
And just recognise that because of COVID, that there was a distortion factor in extra subsidy in there, in that period where it was virtually free, became a free service. Whereas prior to that, it was like a 50-50. So it was still quite an expensive service for the user, but they did get 50% subsidy, I think it was, but not totally. Councillor Thurston.
I just wanted to thank the staff for bringing this report to us. I'm going to out you, Claudia. Brilliant report. I know most of the writing was attributed to you, so hearty congratulations. But anthropologists and sociologists for years have said that you measure a community by how it responds and cares for the disabled in their respective communities, and we've heard figures quoted today about how many people are impacted with disability in our community. But I just wanted to reassure everyone around the table that these aren't free rides we're talking about. These people are subject to registered assessors, and this is all about access and inclusion and empowerment. So as I say, it's a good news story, excellent report, Oliver and the team. And it behoves us to support this in any way we can, because, as I say, but for the grace of God, go we. As Councillor Winters would say, end of message.
I close the conversation down.
I'm just getting down into the weeds, so be very careful.
Any further discussion on this? The resolution is to receive the report.
Move the report.
Moving. Seconded by Meardenia. All in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. So we're making progress. We're into that. We move into the public excluded section, which is just the minutes.
Sorry.
Can I ask,
I move.
you're moving that we're going